The first symptom was the lack of arm swing on one side. You just don't think about your arms when you're walking. They just do what they're supposed to do automatically. And so John said, "Oh, do you know your right arm's not moving when you're walking?" And I thought, "Oh, that's a bit odd."
I woke up and my body was shaking. And to me, I thought I was having a fit.
You know, someone who does triathlons doesn't suddenly say to you, "And by the way, I've got Parkinson's." So it was quite shocking for people to align those two things.
Out of the blue, someone can, within a short space of time, go from being quite healthy, quite okay, everything's going well, to having severe symptoms of Parkinson's disease. I find that kind of heart-wrenching, yeah.
Some numbers that have emerged out of a very recent study suggested that 1 in 37 people alive today would get a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in their lifetime.
My name's Maurice Curtis, and I'm Professor of Neuroscience at the University of Auckland and currently Head of Department of Anatomy and Medical Imaging. I trained as a radiographer working at Auckland Hospital and absolutely loved working in that healthcare sector. But partway through my studies, I did a stage 2 paper in neuroanatomy. And at about the same time, I met somebody that, in fact, I didn't meet them. They were some distance off in a rest home when I was visiting someone. And the person clearly had a severe movement disorder. They were probably early 40s. They looked like they were in the wrong place. They were getting nursing care, but they were surrounded by people that were of a totally different era and age and had totally different care needs to what this person had. And I got talking to the person who was looking after this gentleman, and she said he had Huntington's disease, which I'd never heard of. But I went away and read up a bit about it and found out that it was a neurological, neurodegenerative disease inherited from your parents. And I just thought this was a huge tragedy that someone would live out their life. And I'm sure that that person passed away in that environment without really what they needed, and surrounded by a very different demographic to what they probably imagined for their life. So at that point, I just thought I had to know more.
Parkinson's disease is a really complex disorder. Still, the number one risk factor for Parkinson's is aging. And then there are other risk factors as well that include some environmental factors. So herbicides and pesticides, for example, contribute. Pollution, so air pollution or toxicants in the air can contribute. Things like head trauma as well can contribute. With Parkinson's, you've got around about 6 to 8% of people with Parkinson's have a causative gene, and I think we're up to about 23 genes that are associated with Parkinson's now. So there's all of these different factors that are different causes, different triggers of Parkinson's disease, which make it really, really complex.
There's a group of symptoms or signs that might indicate that someone has Parkinson's disease. One of them is a flat affect. So they have, it's nicknamed the wooden face, where they struggle to show their emotion. The movement thing is common. People often say that they experience a lot of what we call REM behaviour, sleep disorder. And this is where they essentially act out their dreams at night. So it'll be thrashing around in the bed, trying to fight something or kick against something that they're dreaming about. And it's disturbing to them, and it's disturbing to their partner if they have one. The olfactory system or loss of the sense of smell is also a really common precursor, but we often don't test for that, largely because people often don't know that they've lost their sense of smell. We don't use our sense of smell like a rat would or like a dog would, where their behaviour would change significantly if they lost their sense of smell. But that is one of the earliest indicators that Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease is on its way.
We were on holiday and we were walking down a wharf in Croatia, and my right hand started to tremor, and I turned to my husband and I said, "Looks like I've got Parkinson's." I might have sworn a little bit, but and that was the first time I experienced a tremor, and that was the start.
I was playing rugby league for Mangere East, and I got an injury on my elbow, and ended up going that way. So I had surgery, and after surgery, that's where I started feeling funny. I started to be slow. I mean, to me, I was fine, you know. I felt like I was moving normal, but everyone else saw me as slow. I was wondering, why is that? Why am I so slow?
The region that's affected in the brain, it's kind of, if you went in under your ears and went straight into the centre of the brain, you'd be somewhere around about there. And it's an area called the substantia nigra, the black substance. And that's where about 95% of the brain's dopamine, and dopamine is the neurotransmitter that keeps us somewhere between psychotic and delusional on one side and stiff and rigid on the other. And so you have too little dopamine in Parkinson's, and so people experience stiffness and rigidity. And in conditions like schizophrenia, you have too much dopamine, and so you have the psychosis and the delusions and things like that on the other hand. And so for most people, they're right in the middle there with neither of those scenarios. They're right in the middle. And so once 60 to 80% of those dopamine-producing cells have died, then you start to get the overt symptoms of classical Parkinson's disease. Stiffness and rigidity, a difficulty in being able to get off a chair, to move. That dopamine normally liberates the activity of the frontal lobe, which is what helps us with memory. It helps us with executive function, your ability to organize your day, your ability to switch between tasks. Those are the things that the frontal lobe does for us. And so dopamine's holding us in that nice sweet spot where all that we've learnt to do can be done. And when the dopamine starts to disappear, all the things we've learnt to do can't be done. So planning your day, the executive functioning, switching between tasks, we start to get worse at that, and the stiffness and rigidity comes in.
I would be out walking or running and my foot would cramp up. So I thought, well, this is a bit odd. So I went to the doctor and he said, oh, look, it's probably lack of magnesium, which we all thought, yeah, that'll be it, you know. And that didn't happen after taking magnesium. Nothing worked. And then the other symptom was I started to overbalance, and I'd be doing something like brushing my teeth and leaning forward, and I'd just keep going forward. And I thought, oh. And so I went back to the doctor again, and we listed the symptoms, and then he pops his head up and says, well, you're off to the neurologist. And I'm like, oh, God, what's all that about?
A diagnosis of Parkinson's currently has to be done by a neurologist. So a GP or another healthcare professional may suspect Parkinson's disease and then refer their patient to see a neurologist. And then the neurologist would do a number of tests, most of which are around motor symptoms. There's questionnaires that are used, and lots of non-motor symptoms as well, but they're predominantly looking for motor symptoms that we all associate with Parkinson's disease.
You walk up and down, you sniff some vanilla essence or something similar to that, and your doctor sort of tries to ascertain whether you're starting to lose some of your sensory perception and stability.
Where you and I might easily hop off a chair. Someone with Parkinson's will take some time to hop off the chair because they can't get their movements going in a smooth, coordinated way. When they try and articulate something, they might start out well, but the language tails off towards the end of the sentence. When they're writing something, the same thing happens. So that motivation to maintain a particular way of doing things drops off with time, and that's because of the dopamine that's missing in Parkinson's disease.
All he said to me was, if I walk. So when we walk one way and you come back. And I came back and he goes, oh, he's got it. And I said, oh, what have I got? Oh, you have a disease called Parkinson's. And at the time I laughed, I said to myself, I just can't be right. I'm not, because not to be racist, but I thought at the time it was a Parkinson disease. And I was like, no, I can't, it's not possible. I can't have Parkinson's. And she goes, no, you do have it. You have early onset of it. So.
It's hugely unfair. Sometimes I see somebody who's perhaps not very healthy, and I say, why haven't they got Parkinson's? Why is it me? But, picks who it wants to pick.
It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease, and it's the fastest growing one. So we shouldn't be fearful of it, but I think we should be mindful that this is something that affects many, many people in our community. The fact that so many people know someone or have met someone with Parkinson's disease says this is a big problem to be dealt with. This is a challenge, a disease that we want to get rid of.
None of my family have ever had it going back as far as I can see. There's nobody with Parkinson's or any neurological, so that was quite a surprise. And they're thinking, gosh, because I was very fit and did marathons here and there and half marathons. And so it just shows it doesn't matter, who you are, where you live, what your religions are, or anything like that. You're all susceptible to something like this.
It's not a disease that we know who's going to get it. In fact, the predictability of who's going to get it is close to zero.
Parkinson's is something that people see as an old person's disease. They see it as a male-dominated disease, and they still see it as people think you can treat it, but you can't. And, there is a huge explosion and growth in the number of people with Parkinson's, and so there are going to be more people like me, and there are going to be more younger people.
I had a little knowledge. What I knew was Michael J. Fox and Muhammad Ali. They had Parkinson's, and all I saw in Parkinson's was shaking. So when I heard Muhammad Ali died of it, I got scared of my own. And when they told me I had Parkinson's, I was scared that I might die early. And so it scared me for a bit, and I went home, and after that, and for 2 years I got stuck in my bedroom for hiding myself away.
I think of it as a waveform that's always trending down. So you can have peaks within that waveform and troughs, and peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs, but the on average trend is downwards. So even within your disease, you can, within a year, you can have multiple periods where you might be doing a whole lot better and multiple periods where you're doing a whole lot worse.
I didn't like the disease because I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't play rugby league. It just killed my whole life, and everything that I wanted to do, it didn't allow me. It didn't allow me to do it.
I've noticed in the last year, particularly, I've found it a bit harder, particularly physically, walking and running and trying to go to the gym and things like that is getting harder.
I think with Parkinson's disease, a little bit like that gentleman that I saw back in the rest home, Parkinson's often gets to people when they're in the prime of their life, when they're maybe towards the end of a very successful career, expecting to have 20 more years of working in the business they've developed, working in the specialty that they've become good at, and then Parkinson's comes along and takes away some of the very essence of who they are, because it affects their executive functioning, their ability to organise their day, their ability to switch between mental tasks, and their ability to move as they might expect to.
It's challenging finding a partner, because they see me when I'm well, but then when I tell them I got Parkinson's, they just fade away easily. To be honest, I could commit suicide 3 times, and I put my family through a lot. And that's what I hated, that I was putting my family through a lot, and I didn't want to be a burden on them. So
I guess the first bit is allowing people to help. without Sue's help, I certainly would be struggling a hell of a lot more than I am now. And I shouldn't be admitting this on film, but she backs the car out of the garage every day because she thinks if I try and back the car, something will go wrong. And so she does lots of things like that for me that just make my life one bit easier.
After me and my wife split up, I was getting to a bad time. I went to my mum's house. She's the one that pulled me through. She made me feel comfortable. Yeah.
I'm so proud of my son because he's a fight person. No matter what this sickness he had now, but I told him, I can help when I can see you can't do anything.
One of the challenges that people with Parkinson's disease have is that people might even see them if they're sitting across the table from them at a dinner party, or they meet them at the wherever they like to socialise. They might even think that the person is being a bit grumpy or not very expressive or not engaged because they may have the flatness in the face, even though that person is wanting to engage and trying to engage, but the disease means that they don't express their mood or their emotions through their physical appearance. But if you don't know that's part and parcel of the disease, then you won't respond appropriately.
My friends are gone, and because of my illness, and every time I tried to talk to them and I couldn't talk, they kind of just noticed, and they just kind of faded away. And I was left there by myself, just standing there, just and so I lost all my friends and trying to make new ones, and it's kind of hard because none of them understand what I'm going through.
I actually felt that I had to tell people. So we did, and mostly they were very supportive. Other people, we had some very strange reactions. Things like, oh, well, you better do your bucket list then. Or, what, you? You? Everyone thought it was my husband and not me.
I've been there. People look at Sharon and go, well, how can you be sick? You look so fit and you look so healthy. People say, oh, you're looking so well. But, on the outside, yeah, but not on the inside.
Usually they just say, oh, you don't look like you've got it, because they've got that preconceived idea of, you've got to be shaking, or you've got to be, falling over.
I've really just acknowledged that I had it. Realised that it wasn't going to kill me tomorrow, which was a bonus, and then got up and went back to work. And I thought, look, why not just be open about it, and then make as many jokes as you possibly can about being a mover and a shaker, or kung fu kicks in your sleep. All of those things are part of disarming the situation for other people. And to be honest with you, I get a hard time from my management team or anyone these days. There's always some joke or other going on, and I give them a hard time about their various ailments as well. We're all carrying around something.
All right, guys, this is Sharon coming through here. Now, Sharon is beating Parkinson's by getting herself out on triathlons, and Sharon is an absolute superstar, just crushed the sprint triathlon. Can we give Sharon a massive round of applause, my friend? She absolutely deserves it.
I think people don't understand Parkinson's. They don't know that it's a progressive disease. They don't know that there is no cure. They don't know that there's nothing that you can do to stop it. They just think that you shake a bit and you can take some tablets. They know about the physical side of things, but they aren't so aware of the cognitive. I hope that if there is any cognitive things happening, that I'm hiding them.
I think you've got to give people license to talk to you directly about your illness and what they're observing about it as well, because while you become more self-aware, that they're seeing it from another perspective as well. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing if you've got to adapt your style or change. Doesn't mean you're over and out. Doesn't mean you're off to the knackers yard, as a racehorse. It just means that you've got to sit down and think about, okay, I've reached this stage and now I need to do the following things.
I do a lot of karaoke. Karaoke helps most of you have your voice. I don't want to lose my voice, and I don't want So that's why I go karaoke pretty much every week. And I love it because you find better friends there, true friends there. And the ones that stay with you and they're trying to understand you. These people actually go and read up on what Parkinson's is. And they come back in the next day, or next time I see them, and they say, "Oh, I understand where you're coming from."
The description of robbing disease for Parkinson's is a really good one, and I guess the same applies to Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia and Huntington's in a way. It robs people of their quality of life. It robs people of their future, and I can't tell you, how many people with Parkinson's disease I've spoken to over the last few months who talk about how their future has completely changed as a result of the diagnosis. And, it robs them of all the things that they would have otherwise done. It's not just their quality of life and in many cases, ability to work and function as they normally would, but it's their future as well.
I would say pre-Parkinson's, on a daily basis, we talked about retirement and what we were going to do and where we were going to go. And, the anticipation for retirement was huge. And then once I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, those things, might not be possible. We might not have the time that we thought we would have. So I gave Kerry the option of ditching me, to go forward in the life that we'd planned, but he decided he'd stick around.
When you start taking away those things that people rely on, that we think of as very human, the things that people have been proud to develop in themselves, the work ethic, the drive, the ability, that's troubling to see. And it's not just people that have that are top businessmen or lawyers or whatever it is. Even some of the other aspirations that you might have for playing with your children or your grandkids or what have you can fairly quickly be taken away by Parkinson's disease.
Life was pretty good. We had a very successful, booming food company. We had won some awards for various things, and life was pretty sweet. Good friends, good children, good wife, and progressively I noticed, I felt that things were not quite right in my body, and we started to lose a lot more tennis than we used to, and I realised that I would be swiping at the ball, but the ball would be gone, and I was behind it. I was slow in responding to getting to the ball, and having had this partner for 18 years, he wasn't very happy with the amount of time we were losing either.
My wife and I were invited to a charity dinner here in Auckland, and we were seated next to Bernie and Kay. And so we just got chatting really about what Bernie had been through. He explained his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease.
I thought I might have had a slight stroke because I seemed to be weaker down one side than the other. So we went to the neurologist, and the neurologist, that they diagnosed Parkinson's on a sensory basis. It's very, very easy to diagnose once you know what you're looking for. But they made me smell all these different bottles of smell and say what it was. They made me write a quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and I thought that was a bit unusual for an assessment. And they made me walk, and the other things you do is you swing one arm often when you got Parkinson's. One arm swings and the other one just lies stationary at the side. And the interesting thing is that the neurologist wrote to my doctor and says, it's not very often I get a request by a patient to have their attendance improved because they can't beat their doctor.
I really enjoyed engaging with him. He and Kay got talking a bit about their business, and Bernie had sort of explained he'd imagined being in his business kind of until the coffin rolled in, I think was the phrase that he used. He'd really imagined, being heart and soul of that business throughout the entirety of his life. And then Parkinson's disease comes along and he had to kind of reconsider some of those things. So that again, it sort of actually took me back to seeing that guy, sorry, a bit emotional, took me back to seeing that guy in the rest home all those years prior, having the potential taken away. It's the brute of this bloody disease. So at the end of the night, I gave him my business card, and he said, we'll be in touch. I said, come and have a look around, see the work that we're doing. And I didn't think too much more of it other than that it had been a very special evening. And then almost 1 year, I think, to the day, I got an email out of the blue, and they just said, we'd like to have a talk to you about what your work looks like on Parkinson's disease. And we got chatting about, what this might look like. And Bernie had decided that he was going to raise $1 million for Parkinson's disease. And it was partly about talking to his friends about what he was experiencing and about raising awareness. But also it was about raising some money to focus on a cure for Parkinson's disease. In fact, it didn't start out, I don't think, as a cure for Parkinson's. It was an improvement for Parkinson's disease, and over the years transitioned to a cure for Parkinson's disease, which is absolutely the right aspiration. Go for the top.
Because he said the biggest handicap to Parkinson's is research. There's not enough money to do adequate research, so they can't make any groundbreaking advances until they get enough money to fund decent research. So I thought, I could do something purposeful here. It's up my right up my alley to help and contribute. So it's something I thought quite long about, and we discussed it and we set up a charitable trust.
I was asked to go and look after a share club, and as it happened, Bernie was a member of that share club. And what I didn't know is he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so in the first couple of meetings, obviously I became aware of that and the conversations as we caught up. And he also said, I want to do something about it. I want to raise some money. I want for the Centre for Brain Research, and I want to help find a cure for Parkinson's. And I said to Bernie, well, if you ever decide to act on that idea that you want to do something, just give me a ring. And he did. So that's where it all started.
I had to dream up some ambitious targets so that we had something to go for. So no dream too big seemed to be exactly the right fit in terms of a byline, because it was going to be a big dream. Little in New Zealand, taking on the challenges of finding a cure when big laboratories and medical research centres throughout the world couldn't do it. It was with enough gold to try and think we could do it here in New Zealand.
I love Bernie's comment, no dream too big. And it really just encapsulates that Kiwi spirit of, no problem is too big, really. We can get on, we can find a solution, we can innovate, we can be creative. And, we see it with Bernie, we see it in our research team, we see it in Professor Curtis, and, going back decades with Professor Fall, forming relationships with the families of people with neurodegenerative conditions to get the human brain bank that we have here up and running, and then the Centre for Brain Research years later. So, I think it's just a great way to express the way we, as Kiwis, get on and approach massive global problems like Parkinson's.
I was visited by Arthur Veal, and he was a world-class geneticist with an expertise in Huntington's disease. He said, I'm looking after all these Huntington's people, families in Aotearoa, New Zealand, who have this terrible gene which causes this tragic brain disease, Huntington's. And he said the diagnosis when they get given Huntington's disease, because it's a genetically inherited dominant gene, then if the mum or dad have it, then each child will have a 50% chance of getting it. And it kills them within 15 years when it starts coming on. And he said the families would like to know whether or not they really do have this gene in their family. Is the diagnosis correct? Because it was just made on clinical grounds. You couldn't test for the gene because they didn't know what it was. The families would like you to look at the brain of their mum and dad when they die, because the pathology is very distinctive. So we could look at a brain, cut it up, section it, and see exactly what parts have been affected, and we could give a definitive diagnosis of Huntington's. I said, sure, love to. It would be a wonderful privilege. Get me in contact with the families with brain disease. He would arrive along every 2 or 3 months with a brain from a person in Invercargill or the West Coast or wherever, the brain of the mum and dad of a family who they thought had died of Huntington's. And I'd look at the brain, teamed up with a neuropathologist, Dr. Bessinick at Auckland City Hospital, and we would look and study the brain, and we could give a definitive diagnosis. In most cases it was yes, occasionally it was no, but only very occasionally. And tell this to the families, and they were so very grateful just to know definitively. And they, of course, they wished to have good news, but they didn't always get good news. And then they said, well, just keep the brain, do research on it, and find out why these cells die so that our kids are going to have hope for the future. And we began collecting brains of people who died not only of Huntington's, but also Parkinson's, extended into Alzheimer's, motor neurone disease, epilepsy, and so on, all the different types of neurodegenerative diseases. And I suddenly realised, in fact, in 1993, that we were establishing a human brain bank.
We've been supported really by hundreds of families from around New Zealand who have said, carry on, do brain research with my loved one's brain, learn everything you can from this brain because that's going to make a difference for the next generation.
And they were giving you the most incredible gift they could ever give. The brain of their mum or dad, that's actually giving us their mum or dad. And we never, ever took that for granted. We treat that tissue with respect. We say we're just the custodians of the brain for the families. We're using it, and I remind all our students that we're using it to advance knowledge to help the families and to do the best research in the world. So we have now probably one of the best brain banks in the world. It's small, it's a boutique brain bank. We know all the history from each of the families. We keep in contact with the families forever. So this tissue is invaluable. We send tissue with the family's consent to top leading research groups overseas who do things that we can't do in New Zealand because they're experts in scientific areas that we are not. And they often give us antibodies in return or whatever. So it's an international collaborative link that's given the opportunity and an enormous research space for people to do imaginative research. People like Maurice Curtis, using our Parkinson's tissue, interacting with Parkinson patients through their community links and so on. And it's powerful. It makes us unique within the world because there's no other centre for brain research which is like ours. Most of them are big, high-powered scientific towers which pursue research, usually on animal tissue, and very sophisticated research, which is wonderful. So I say that this is doing research the Kiwi way.
One of the absolute core goals of the Brain Bank is to make sure that people can do human brain research, not rodent brain research. It's one of the big challenges, I think, in neuroscience is how do we get people to get away from the mouse or the rat? The human brain is far more complex, and so it makes sense that we try and do research on the human brain.
People didn't really know how to treat or what was going on in the brain. It wasn't really until probably the 1950s that it was identified that actually there was a loss of dopamine in the brain and a loss of neurons.
Replacing dopamine is relatively straightforward. In 1961, it was identified that levodopa, which is the precursor to dopamine, can be given orally. It gets taken up by the brain, and those remaining 20 to 40% of the cells that are there will make up that levodopa into dopamine and do what they should with it. But it's short-lived, and so you have to keep taking more and more of the levodopa. That is the number one mainstay treatment for Parkinson's disease. There's a few problems with it. It does successfully liberate people's movements and thinking and so on. But if you give people too much of it, if they take too much of it, they end up at this end of the spectrum where they can have depression, delusions, psychosis. And also they have to take it multiple times a day to keep them very even on the dopamine scale, whereas normally your brain would be giving micro titers, just tiny amounts of the dopamine at just the right time and responding to cues as to how much it should release. And so it's holding you tightly in that middle section.
It took me ages to get the timing right. The first time I was tried to do 2 hours and found I was sucking my tongue. Sucking my tongue in and my body would twist. And I was sore, man, because my legs would go one way and my top half would go the other way. And it's just kind of harder, and I was trying to fight myself. I lie on the floor, and then I try to squeeze my body in, and I'm trying to squeeze it out. And it's tiring me, okay? It's tiring me because it goes on for a while until the tablets kick in.
The alternative drugs, and these are not overly successful, but they're sort of a second line. If levodopa is not quite doing what it should, then neurologists or general practitioners can trial a bunch of other drugs, and they mostly just help the release of dopamine, or they slow down the mop-up of dopamine. So there's a system for releasing dopamine, a cell responds, and then that cell will mop up the dopamine so that the response doesn't go on forever. So some of the drugs that can be used stop the mop-up of the dopamine so that it can hang around for a bit longer and have a longer lasting effect, which is good if you're lacking dopamine. When it comes to surgical therapies, there's a couple of different lines that are used. One is something that's called deep brain stimulation, and a bit like a pacemaker that gets put into the heart to keep the cells going correctly. You can have a long, thin piece of, looks a bit like a very, very tiny straw that gets put down into a region of the brain called the subthalamic nucleus. And there, the ends of the electrode can be tuned so that you get an optimal or maximal effect for reducing the movement side of the disease or improving the movement side of the disease. This is almost always given to people that have very strong movement problems with Parkinson's disease rather than with the cognitive or executive functioning side of the disease.
The doctors would always say to me, within 10 years or 15 years there's going to be a breakthrough because science is moving at quite a rate. We just need to do the research. And so I took from that great hope. The general theme is the first 5 years is pretty good if you have pop a few pills. The second 5 years gets a bit harder. And then the last 5 years you take as it comes, and it can turn to custard pretty quick for some people. It's a disease where you sort of learn as you go and affects people differently.
Progressively I lost my ability to write. And you think through your pen, when you think about what you use your pen for, it really is sort of something that you're on the end of, but also you think and you write things down, you write lists, you write things down. And I lost my ability to type, so I lost my ability to communicate on a keyboard. Phone numbers were a real challenge. Because I would go and press for a number, so I wanted 025 number, so I press O and I get 4 O's. And by the time I deleted 3 of them, I had gone through most of the alphabet trying to get to the right numbers. So my world slowly but progressively was changing, and I sense it was not changing for good.
We started this 11 years ago, and that was to support Bernie in his dream. And little did I know that I would actually find my wife would be diagnosed, Sue, with Parkinson's 5 years ago. And then it really hits home, and it really does become personal.
Sue was such an active person, loved running, loved exercising, and she could even walk halfway down the lake. Yeah, it is life-changing, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. I've always been such a positive person, and to see Sue not so positive does bring frustration at times. Doesn't matter, you understand, but it still frustrates. it could happen to anyone tomorrow. So could be our grandson, could be my brothers and sisters' family. I don't know. So, yeah, you're doing it because of Sue, absolutely, and Bernie, going back and obviously when we first got started, but it's actually, you now know that it can affect anyone. It's the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. And wow, that's a little bit mind-blowing.
So you learn about yourself, and then you learn about those who've gone before you or those that have it and are coping. Bernie jokes about the tennis ball going past him on the tennis court, and he realised there was something seriously wrong with his game. And so there's a few things that come along like that, like, when you're exchanging cards with a delegation of Chinese business people and you're sort of shaking and dropping them all over the floor, or whether you're walking through the lunchroom and your cup's moving up and down and round and about. So I think those sorts of things are sure signs that you need to get, firstly, professional advice, but secondly, try and do your best to ensure that you slow that progression down. And I've been fortunate that that's been the case for me. Obviously, we all want to live forever, but I've certainly been fortunate that I've had a very good 10 to 12 years because of medication and because of lifestyle choices.
The neurologists even say, exercise is the big thing, just exercise. Interesting, it's like exercise, and then a few of them have said coffee. And I'm like, oh, well, I can handle that one, it'll be great. So just to stimulate the brain, and it's quite, lost plot again there. Sorry.
We do know that 60% of people who lose their sense of smell will go on to develop Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. So it is a known thing, but that leaves 40% of people who can lose their sense of smell, but we don't know why. For some of them, they'll get it back, and we know this with long COVID, that over time, some people get their smell back, but I think we're going to see in the future more cases of people who had long COVID, lost their sense of smell, and then developed Parkinson's disease. I think we can say that that's quite likely given what we've seen previously with pandemics and these sorts of viruses. The thing is that the olfactory neurons are directly exposed to the outside world. So the neurons in your eye are tucked behind your lens and cornea. In your ear, the neurons are protected. The neurons are the functional units of the brain. They're protected by the tympanic membrane. In your skin, the neurons are protected by a little bit of skin. In your nose, every time you breathe in and breathe out, you are directly exposing those brain cells that detect smell to the environment, to the bugs that are living in there, viruses, bacteria, mycoplasma, anything that's in your nose are directly exposing neurons to those things. And so you can have a scenario where over the course of many years, you can slowly introduce changes into those neurons, which then spread further back in the brain, leading to Parkinson's disease. At least this is one strong theory around it. There's no question that the problematic proteins in Parkinson's disease begin in the olfactory system or one other system in the brain and then spread. That's unequivocal. How relevant that spread is, or whether you would actually get development of the aberrant protein further back in the brain if you didn't get it up front, is what we're not certain about.
People who lose their sense of smell, not only in Parkinson's, but also people with Alzheimer's and actually Huntington's. So it's not a precise feature of only Parkinson's. It is if you could call it a risk factor, you see. It's an early flag saying this person's brain is not working well.
So the area that I think we can not treat Parkinson's disease better, but cure Parkinson's disease, hopefully, is to look at those very early origins. What goes wrong first in the brain? Before someone gets a movement disorder, before they have an executive functioning disorder. And we know that things like the REM behaviour sleep disorder, constipation or gut issues, and loss of the sense of smell are the big three. Those are the three things that change. We have very little background to understand the human olfactory system with. If you look on Wikipedia, the olfactory system is a mouse olfactory system overlaid onto a picture of the human brain. And this is because most of what we know about it is actually derived from mice. And so what do people think? They assume that what's going on in a mouse is exactly what goes on in the human. And it turns out not to be so. Rodents don't get Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease. Humans do. When you start in a field where there's no real background or context to understand the basic biological system, let alone what's happening in disease, you then have to do all of the groundwork first, and then you have to say, so what's happening here in disease, and what could we modify in order to slow down the progression of Parkinson's disease? That's what Cure Parkinson's New Zealand have funded over the last 6 years or so, is that work understanding the basic biology of the human olfactory system. And they've funded some of the work to tell us what's changing in that system in Parkinson's disease.
We're all about a cure for Parkinson's, and I think it's worth asking, well, what is a cure, right? So a cure or a disease-modifying therapy is actually a therapy that can stop or slow the progression of Parkinson's disease. Currently, there are no disease-modifying therapies for Parkinson's disease. So we want to get upstream of where the current therapies are that are all about replacing lost neurons or replacing the neurochemical dopamine that is lost or stimulating the areas of the brain through DBS that are no longer being stimulated. We want to get upstream of that. So before the neurons are lost, what can we do to stop the deterioration, the loss of neurons that would happen later? So yes, early diagnosis is a key part of that puzzle, so we can identify people very early on before these effects in the brain are manifest. And then we need to understand the disease biology. We know a lot more now than we did even 10 years ago, and we're really focused on developing small molecule drugs that can stop some of the biological pathways that ultimately lead to those neurons being lost in Parkinson's disease.
Every morning I wake up and wonder how my day's going to be. So after hard living your life on tablets, I'm hoping that the tablets will work on the day and try to carry me through the day. And sometimes, most times it does. Sometimes it doesn't. So, but I try not to tell it, not to share my family or anybody else. I don't want them to worry about me and especially my mum. I don't want to give my mum, because I know she's growing older, and like I said, I don't want them to be don't want to be a burden on them. And so that's one of the hard things. Also, I don't want them to live their life around me when they can do more for themselves, you know.
At the weekend, I had 2 of my grandchildren, and they know I have Parkinson's, and they were trying to ask me questions to work out if I was going to die. Well, what happens with Parkinson's? So I'd give them an answer. Well, what happens next? So I'd give them an answer. It's cancer, isn't it, Nanny? I said, no, it's not cancer. Well, what happens? What's going to happen? Well, I can't really tell them that, but it's enough. It's enough of a worry for them that they want to check that, yeah, it's not cancer, because they understand cancer is something that people die from, but they can't understand what Parkinson's is.
I think a lot of people also don't quite grasp, and I think donors can, if you can help them, is that if you can slow the disease down, that's as good as curing it. You know, you can die with Parkinson's instead of from Parkinson's. So if you can delay it, and just live a healthy life with Parkinson's, well, fantastic.
It would be nice to be able to think that people could live right the way through until they can go no longer, but with their brain fully intact.
It's something that is tantalisingly close to A, better understanding, and B, better solutions, or even a cure. And so that's where I think the opportunity to get in and help people like Professor Curtis, people like Sir Richard, the Brain Bank, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, you know, the UK equivalent of what we do with Cure Parkinson's here. All of those organisations are striving to do the same thing. And one thing we noticed was if we could just get a greater consensus of how we work together and how we share information, partly for the medical professionals, but also partly just for ourselves, the quicker we can progress the solution to this disease.
In the business world, we call it the hockey stick, you know, where you're sort of building, steadily making progress, but small progress. And then you get onto a steeper curve and things can take off and rapidly become very, very successful. And it's no different in terms of the research world. And so much groundwork has been done internationally and here in New Zealand to advance understanding Parkinson's. Right now, we're in a really just getting onto that steep part of the curve where if we can put money in now, significant money, we can make a big difference to really accelerate in a relatively short period of time where we get to on finding a cure for Parkinson's.
At least 50% of the research work that we do is funded by philanthropy, by generous people who decide to give some funds to advance the cause, to try and get rid of Parkinson's disease. So we rely heavily on people's generosity, New Zealanders' generosity to fund the research that we do. Research staff are paid based on the funding they can attract for their particular project. So they're always having to put a concept together, pitch it, either get funded or not, and then put another concept together, pitch it, and get funded or not. Every time a staff member has to leave because there's no more funding, a project just sits there waiting for more funding to be able to pick that project up and then carry it on. What that means is that someone has to come in, pick up the old protocols, the protocols that the person before them developed, and work their way up to being able to produce the same results that person did, and then advance the project. Whereas if we'd been able to keep that first person continuously working on the project, we would get rid of that whole trough that occurs, which can be months, or for some projects, even years. And that ultimately leads to a slowdown in our chances of finding a cure for Parkinson's disease.
So the minimum amount we're looking to raise is $3 million, and that's for a 3-year project to fund 6 postdoctoral scientists at the Centre for Brain Research, University of Auckland. And this is what we're calling our dream team. So it's a collaborative team of medicinal chemists, neuroanatomists, and neuropharmacologists working collaboratively together to develop or create and develop therapies that can stop and slow some of the disease progression, the aspects of biology that go wrong in Parkinson's disease. So that's really where we want to focus. The other $2 million, so at the upper end we're saying $5 million, is really to then take some of those and put them into clinical trials. And you know that's where we're at now. Over time, we would hope to be doing a lot more clinical trials. But first of all, we need to start, you know, really getting some promising candidates to put into, first of all, you know, models of Parkinson's disease, but then eventually into humans and give people the opportunity to take these new drugs.
There are so many good causes out there that need support. So why Parkinson's? Why do this? Well, we've got amazing people, and it's great people that drive great outcomes. So that's first and foremost. And then the interesting part of the conversation with potential donors is, well, can we help them really believe that we can find a cure for Parkinson's? How will their donation make a difference to getting us to that outcome of a cure? And as a trust,
hit the target.
We are working hard to be able to articulate to people where on that journey we are.
We're starting to see progress where there's not just investigation going on, but there's actually confidence that we're going to get closer to making this disease much less prevalent and also less debilitating.
There's plenty of reason to have hope in better treatments or cures, I think, in the future for Parkinson's disease. The time frame's always difficult to put on it because it does depend a bit on how drug discovery processes go and how quickly you can get ideas through the FDA, for instance, or getting clinical trials done. But there's a good range of clinical trials going on globally. There's a lot of work going on around supportive technologies, helping people to live more effectively with the disease, and that's really important as well. But there's also this element that we probably tend not to focus on so much, and that is, are there things that you can do that will reduce your risk of getting Parkinson's disease? And there are. They're not things that you can't bring that risk down to zero, but we usually think about things like exercise being really important. There's evidence for a healthy diet being important, and also really controlling blood pressure. So the brain loves a very consistent supply of blood and glucose and all of the things that it needs. And so if you can keep your blood pressure really well monitored and under control, that makes a huge difference for reducing your risk of getting Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease.
You cannot run it. It's going to get you. So to make sure if it does get you, you really got the best chance of living a full and enjoyable life. Help us fund research in it, because without any research we get a cure. And really it could be you who really needs or was looking for the cure. So help us if you can, please. It would be appreciated. We will treat your dollar with the respect that is due, and thank you so much.
You know, we're raising money for Parkinson's research, right? So I've got to be able to look people in the eye and let them know that they're backing the best people. And obviously not just us, but Morris at the Centre for Brain Research, but also people around the world. You know, we've hooked up with the Cure Parkinson's UK, Shake It Up Australia, Michael J. Fox Foundation. These are the best people in the world. We're seeking out to partner with the best, to have the best people working with us, to make sure that the money is going in the very best places it possibly can right now to achieve the best outcomes as we try to find a cure for Parkinson's.
The brain just controls so much of what we do. Your thoughts, your emotions, your aspirations, your dreams, and your ability to move and actually do just the practical things that we think of as being human. And so to be able to understand what's changing in brain diseases is actually the final frontier, in my opinion.
The best research is where you just head in a direction and don't have too many specific directives. You know, you can't list down what your outcomes are going to be before you start. That's why the support we're getting, the Centre for Brain Research from Cure Parkinson's New Zealand, it's philanthropy. It is dream money, you see, supporting the establishment of a Parkinson's Research Centre, now CBR, and putting neurobiologists together with neuropharmacologists and with chemists as a team to say, go into this world of Parkinson's and be innovative. And we're not going to tell you that you've got to do this or that, but we'll provide you the resources for you to be innovative so that we can stop people getting Parkinson's by your cure. That is dream money, and dreams come true.
Life now is one of taking very much every day as it comes, enjoying it as much as I can, celebrating the good and trying to disregard the not so good. But I do notice that things are not as easy as they once were. My balance is deteriorating, as I've said. So that's really the journey of my time with Parkies.
He's a treasure, absolute treasure. We've been lucky, but without research there is no cure, and that's just the way it is.
It's real. It's not this ephemeral, far-off thing, but actually a cure for Parkinson's is something tangible that we can achieve, and we can change the world, and we can change the future for people with Parkinson's.